This is Minding the Forest, a podcast of the Louisiana Forestry Association. Hello, I'm your host, Jeff Zeringue, media specialist for the LFA. In Minding the Forest, we talk about forestry. Forest landowners, loggers, and wood manufacturers, such as lumber, paper, and pellet mills, all play an important role in the conservation and management of forests for the important renewable natural resource it is. Managed forests offer more for wildlife and water protection, so the LFA advocates to keep forests as forests. This episode of Minding the Forest is sponsored by First South Farm Credit. First South is your premier rural lender. With over 100 years financing timber and agriculture, they have the expertise you're looking for when financing rural property. If you're looking to purchase or refinance land, call your local First South Farm Credit office, or you can find them online at firstsouthland.com. Welcome to Minding the Forest. We have with us today Jaesoon Hwang, who is a plant pathologist with the U.S. Forest Service Forest Health Protection, and Wood Johnson, who is an entomologist with the U.S. Forest Service Forest Health Protection. Both of these gentlemen work in the Pineville office for the USDA Forest Service. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to have y'all here today. The topic today is invasive species. First, Jaesoon, let's talk a little bit about you, where you're from, a little bit about your background.
So, yes, I was born and raised in South Korea, and I did my master's back there and came to the U.S. for PhD at North Carolina State University and did some postdoc work at Clemson University in South Carolina, and moved down to Louisiana, Pineville area about 9 years ago. And ever since then, I've been serving as a tree pathologist at USDA Forest Service Forest Health Protection here in Pineville.
Good to have you here. And Wood, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Originally from Alabama, moved to Baton Rouge when I was starting high school, and then continued on at LSU with an undergrad in forest management, then a master's in entomology there at LSU, and started working for the Forest Health Protection Unit here in Pineville in 2004, and I'm still here.
Let's talk a little bit about invasive species. What would you say in forestry is the most troublesome species that we have in Louisiana, the invasive species?
So if you don't mind, since today's topic is about invasive pests,
yes,
if you don't mind, I would like to define the term invasive
even
before
better,
we
please,
move on
yes.
to the specific disease and insect problems.
Okay.
So there is emerging pest, invasive pest, and exotic pest. And you may have heard people are using those terms interchangeably. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is exotic pest is something new to that area. It doesn't need to be causing a lot of damage in the new area. Mm-hmm. If it's something new, it's similar as non-native pest. If it's something new to that area, we call it exotic. Okay. And for emerging disease, I bet Dr. Laura Sims at Louisiana Tech already covered the brown spot needle blight on loblolly pines.
Yes.
And that's a classic example of emerging disease because it has been previously identified and reported back in 1929. And it's been staying under the radar on loblolly pines until like 6 to 7 years ago. And for some reasons, it started resuming causing a lot of damage on loblolly pines. So that is the definition of emerging disease.
Ah, okay.
It is not non-native. It's native. It's here already, but for some reason it starts attacking plants all of a sudden. And finally, the invasive pest that we're going to talk about today, it has to meet 3 categories to be called as invasive.
Okay.
First, it has to be exotic, non-native. That means it has to be new to this area. And secondly, it has to cause a lot of damage. They need to, lastly, they need to adapt to new area and spread successfully. And they have to cause severe damage.
When you say to this area or to an area,
Yeah.
Is that specifically from a foreign country or a different hemisphere or continent? How is that
Well, it
defined?
could be anything, but mostly from foreign country. And sometimes they couldn't figure out where it's originated. So they would say somewhere in Southeastern Asia, somewhere in Europe, somewhere in Central America. So, yeah, it has to be from foreign country for sure. But sometimes they don't know what, I mean, they cannot specify where exactly it's originated.
Just that it ain't from around here, I guess I'd say.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Yes.
We have different types of invasive species. You had mentioned disease as well as insects or maybe plant life. Let's talk a little bit about that, Wood.
I would sort of add on to what Jaesoon says. We have several exotic insects that can be found in Louisiana, but only a very small number of what you would consider invasive and problematic. Lots of ambrosia beetles related to the bark beetles, related to southern pine beetle in the same family. There are a dozen plus species that have come in from overseas in packing materials and so on. But they are in the background. They're established. We collect them in trapping studies all the time, but they're just not problematic. On the other end of the spectrum, you have insects such as the emerald ash borer, the non-native insect that colonizes and kills our native ash trees. Though not here, there are some other invasive non-native insects that have caused problems elsewhere. What comes to mind, Cyrex noctilio, a wood wasp, a species of wasp that oviposits into either dead and declining or in some cases live and stressed trees, has been a big problem in other parts of the world and was introduced into New York back in 2004, 2005. But because of the varying environmental conditions, maybe host characteristics, for some reason it hasn't been a problem in the U.S. as it has elsewhere. So if you shift gears over to invasive plants, some of the more problematic species that we have and have dealt with, some have had to deal with, include Chinese tallow tree, which is great for honeybees and other pollinators and the production of honey. However, is quite invasive, particularly in the wetter sites, and can just take over an open pasture or along the riparian areas, and it's really hard to get rid of. You also have Kogan grass, a non-native grass that is originally from Asia and East Africa, and in some parts of Louisiana, the southeast, there are a few other isolated infestations in southwest Louisiana, one infestation that we know of in Grant Parish, but for whatever reason, it's not growing at near the rate, or at least it's not nearly as problematic in Louisiana as it has been in Mississippi, eastward to Georgia and Florida.
Does it seem unusual because the climate seems so close along that U.S. southeastern area?
Yes, in my mind, it does seem unusual. I specialize in insects, but from what I've read, it was introduced to Alabama in 1912, I believe, as packing material in crates. The straw for packing material escaped, became established. So it's been in Alabama for 120 some odd years, and only in relatively recent history has it been a problem. So I don't know if these cases in Louisiana may be a problem one day or not, undetermined.
Well, that's why continued study is done to these species. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. You mentioned the tallow tree. I guess, Jaesoon, that would fall under your purview as far as plant species like that that can be problematic. Are these sometimes plants or trees that are ornamental that escape from yards, or seeds are transferred, or am I just off base in thinking that?
Well, another characteristics of those invasive pests or plants, they're really aggressive, and they're new to the area, and most of trees, they don't know how to deal with it. They don't have right defense mechanism. They don't have enough time to co-evolution.
Mm-hmm.
So they're completely exposed. I bet the same principle applies to the invasive plants too. New area is completely exposed to this attack by new invasive plants or pests or disease or insects. So
you're saying that as these species, be they plant or insect, as they come up and evolve together, there are checks and balances on each other.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The trees need some time to figure out how to defend themselves against this new invasive species.
Wow. And there's probably no estimation as how long something like that could take, huh?
Well, I wish I could have the answer, but yes, no.
Okay.
Sorry, I can tell the definite.
Well, I mean, it's certainly understandable. That's why we study these things, and certainly as with the world economy that we have nowadays, as opposed to how things have moved slowly in centuries past, I would imagine more things end up on each other's shores than ever before. So, how do you monitor for anything like that? Is it when a situation occurs that, like you said, damage is done, and then we discover what it is?
Well, so this for invasive plant diseases, it takes some time to figure out what it is, because trees are dying, and they just assume that it's something else. I mean something like native pest, like root rot or something like that. But most of times, they need to figure out what it is, and then they will need to figure out where they come from. And trees will keep on dying in the meantime, and after that they will figure out what it is, and then they can start survey programs and early detection programs. For example, there's I would call it this is the invasive tree disease of the century, which is southern oak death. It's killing millions of tan oak and other California oak species in California and Oregon. And, they're spending millions of dollars to detect and quarantine. It's a federally regulated pathogen. Oh. So they spend millions of dollars for early detection and stream survey, vegetation survey. They go into the nurseries, commercial nurseries, because that same pathogen can also infect nursery plants, not just oak trees. So, that's basically, it's done by either state or federal, but oftentimes they don't have enough manpower or money to do that, like a region-wide survey.
Has that turned up in Louisiana yet?
That's disease. I would say disease has not, but the pathogen is here, because a couple of incidents of positive detection of the pathogen has happened here in Louisiana. One is one planted tree in commercial area, I believe, that was shipped from the West. I think it's either California or Oregon. And the other incident was, I cannot tell the location because federally regulated pathogen, but it's not that far from here. But it's found in a nursery.
Mm-hmm.
It's also probably originated from the nursery shipment from the California side.
So
but there's no like wildlife, wild tree, like natural trees in wildlife settings. We don't have the infected trees yet.
So that hasn't been discovered, but just in trees that have come from California and
seedlings.
Do you know where the pathogen has originated?
Yeah, it's believed to originated somewhere near Vietnam.
Okay.
Yes.
So we could get something from outside the country, even through interstate commerce, and buying a tree from California or the Midwest or wherever one might buy a tree.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the disease was first detected back in 1995 in California, and it spread from forest settings to nursery plants, nearby nurseries. And I think it's 2004. One of the largest nursery plant provider shipped a lot of plants to all of the U.S. And later it turned out they shipped to like 39 states.
Wow.
And the pathogen was detected from 22 states. So once again, the long distance movement always involved human activities like, shipping or movement of the infested plant materials.
I mean, you can buy practically anything on the internet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And
wow.
There's another case. I mean, so many cases were like confirmed that like so-called rhododendron enthusiast or whatever they want to call themselves.
Yeah.
Bought those plants from California and Oregon side using mail order and online retailers. And then that's the way of introduction of the new pathogen into new area.
Wow. That might make me hesitate whether I'm going to buy a tree or something from online.
Yeah, I think it's the same as like a Don't Move Firewood campaign.
Yeah.
They have a guideline, like their catchphrase is like buy local, burn local, right?
Right.
So I would say for this case, buy local and plant local.
Good advice. Get back to insects again. You and I talked about the emerald ash borer years ago, and there was a program to try and, I guess, combat the spread of that using wasps. Talk a little bit about that, and is that maybe not necessarily that specific program, but there are efforts like that going on to try and combat these species?
Let me start by saying the science world calls that biocontrol, meaning that as opposed to insecticidal or fungicidal control, the idea is you release predator species of insects or other organisms, nematodes, what have you, to control or at least in part lessen the impact of an invasive insect or other organism. So with the case of emerald ash borer, because it was introduced in Michigan in southern Canada first in 2002, or it was likely introduced in the late 90s, but not detected until ash trees started dying and confirmed to be an exotic. Folks up in the north part of the country or the north part of U.S. began attempting to identify parasitoid wasps, parasitoid egg predators in China, in Asia, that were known to be associated with the emerald ash borer, brought them back to the States and began rearing them with the intention of then releasing in these emerald ash borer affected ash stands to help combat or slow down the impact of emerald ash borer. Fast forward to the first detection of emerald ash borer in North Louisiana back in 2015. The Forest Service, LSU, Ag Center, and the state, Louisiana Department of Ag and Forestry, made an effort to release these species in emerald ash borer infested areas in Webster Parish. There are 4 species involved there. One is an egg parasitoid that is in the fly group, or closely related to flies. The other 3 are wasps that prey on specific stages of the immature of the emerald ash borer. The larvae, they target different larval stages. Of the 4 species, one is more appropriate for the northern latitudes of the U.S. 2 have been attempted to be established in Louisiana and other parts of the South. The egg parasitoid and one of the larval parasitoids. Unfortunately, what we've seen in both Louisiana and Arkansas from these releases, it doesn't seem to establish well in our areas. The theory, and evidence supports this, is that our climate is so much warmer in Louisiana that emerald ash borer produces 1 generation per year. And what that means is that the larvae, the larval stage, and the eggs of emerald ash borer, all eggs hatch and all larvae progress through each instar from around April to July, August, and then they pupate, or rather they dive into the outer sapwood where they are not reachable by these parasitoids. And so the parasitoids have several generations a year. The first generation may prey on emerald ash borer in that time frame, but then when the second generation emerges, there is no food available. There are no more eggs. There are no more larvae for them to locate. So therefore, those populations fail. Then therefore, those attempts to release these parasitoids just haven't been successful in Louisiana.
So the study goes on to determine what else might be done, it would seem.
At the moment, emerald ash borer is so widespread, and the only states in the east that are not known to have emerald ash borer are Mississippi and Florida. And it's very likely that they are in Mississippi but haven't been detected yet. Emerald ash borer is notoriously difficult to detect in traps. Whereas one of the main reasons is because they don't have a long-range sex pheromone. Pheromones, as folks know, are ways that insects communicate with each other. Insects have an acute sense of smell and can detect the opposite sex from long distances, as is the case with southern pine beetle. Southern pine beetle trapping is very successful due to this long-range sex pheromone. You can put a trap out with a host attractant and a pheromone, and the southern pine beetle adults orient to that and come straight to the trap from several hundred yards away. Emerald ash borer, on the other hand, do not have a long-range sex pheromone, and they use visual symptoms. They use visual cues more so than odors. So when you put a trap in an ash tree attempting to catch an emerald ash borer adult, if they're not right there on top of that tree, they're not going to come to your trap when there's all this fresh host odor elsewhere in the area. There may be ash right next to that tree where your trap is. So it's just really tough to detect emerald ash borer.
By the time you actually catch them in the trap, they're probably infested already in that area.
Yes, and through our trapping and that of others, you've got a whole lot better chance of catching an emerald ash borer if it's in an infested tree, which is unfortunate because you're trying to detect them in areas where they're not known yet.
Yeah.
So because of all of that, they're difficult to detect. Once they're there in an area, it's likely they've been there for a few years, and it's just taken that long for the population to grow to a point where your probability of detecting them is pretty high, because of that, the effort to do research on parasitoid wasps, et cetera, have sort of lost steam. It's a matter of cost and reward, unfortunately.
Well, and it's continued to study to see what else we can look at and move on to possibly another solution.
Yes, there has been a good bit of work done in the Midwest on determining if there are individuals within the ash population of a given species that are naturally tolerant or even resistant to emerald ash borer larval feeding. I believe that's still being determined. I don't think they have hard evidence yet, but because a lot of that research is going on in other states up north, I'm not certain on where they are with that. They've taken seed and or cuttings from ash that are still there. They're lingering, and they've outplanted them with the intent of exposing them to emerald ash borer in the future. But as Jaesoon mentioned earlier, there's this huge time lag between when a species may develop resistance or express resistance to larval feeding. It could be several years before an ash is attractive to an emerald ash borer, as they seem to prefer larger diameter material, certainly 2 inches or so in diameter and greater. And then what we've found at these sites that are infested with emerald ash borer, the smallest ash, the ash saplings, are the last to be attacked, and in some cases not attacked. So in these cases where they're trying to produce a resistant genotype, it could be quite a while before those results are known.
Jaesoon, you had mentioned in our email exchange earlier, you had mentioned that there was another disease that you wanted to talk about.
Yes,
that was problematic. What is that?
So I already mentioned about southern oak death, but this one is actually causing a lot of damage right now here in Louisiana. The name of the tree disease is laurel wilt. It infects. It's a fungal disease, and the fungus is carried by an insect vector like red bay ambrosia beetle and several other beetle species. And it infects laurel family plants from laurel family that includes red bay, sassafras, swamp bay, and avocado. Avocado can be it's causing a lot of economic loss in Florida.
Wow.
Because it's really aggressive. It's just typical of invasive plant pathogen.
Well, folks around here who need the sassafras to make filet for their gumbo, I'm sure will be worried about that as well. They better make a stock of those leaves now before it's too late. So the pathogen was introduced near Savannah, Georgia, like back in 2002. So it took about 12 years to get here. The first detection in Louisiana was 2014. And since then, we have 14 parishes, confirmed parishes right now. Wow.
And I believe we have more actually, but it hasn't reported yet through the right channel of communication.
Are those parishes contiguous or?
Yes, mostly from north down to central Louisiana. And then there's a gap between, I think there is 2 more parishes in north part of Baton Rouge. So there is a gap, but I bet you can find some infected trees there if you go to the gap and look really hard.
Yeah. Just not as prevalent as the 2 lower parishes that were discovered.
Well, probably those trees in central Louisiana, especially, it's close to our field office. So, we sometimes we just drove around this area and look for those sick trees, dying trees. So, yeah.
So what does it do? I mean, how does it progress, I should say?
So it has a long distance movement. Is once again involved the human activities like movement of the shipping materials and packaging materials, I should say, and like firewood, log, and so on. But the short distance local movement is caused by insect vectors or root grafting. So the insect, the red bay ambrosia beetle, which carries the fungal spores in their mouth part, they can fly up to like a couple of miles. So they can be the culprit for localized short distance movement.
Wow. Does that transfer from generation to generation with the insects, or is it something that they eat and they carry on? I mean, that would be your area, I think.
Yes. So with other ambrosia beetles, these are a really interesting group. The females disperse from an infected tree. They have specialized mouth parts, as Jaesoon mentioned, specialized pouches within their mouth parts called mycangia, basically just little pouches that contain this fungus that is obligatory to the larvae for development. When a female attacks sassafras or red bay, she tunnels into the sapwood, maybe a few inches. At that point, she starts constructing chambers to lay her eggs. As those larvae mature, they're feeding on that fungus, and ultimately they will, through ingesting the fungus, they will store some of the spores, in those specialized pouches, and then disperse to a new host and introduce the fungus there.
So the fungus that's causing the problem is food for the little ones.
Correct.
Wow.
And that fungus is really aggressive. So like only one or two insects enter into the main trunk can kill the tree within like several months.
Correct. Yeah, just one.
Really?
Yeah.
One female is all it takes to infect and kill a large tree.
Considering how numerous insects are in this area of the world, it could take one or two that could kill an entire tree.
Within several months.
And
within months.
Yeah.
And these ambrosia beetles are microscopic. I think they're between 1 and 2 millimeters long.
So you don't have any detection until it's about to die, I imagine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The tree is about to die.
Correct. You see symptoms, the wilting foliage, and staining in the sapwood. If you were to remove the bark, there's dark blue or black staining, but by that time, obviously, it's too late.
Yeah.
And to speak to the coevolution that Jaesoon mentioned, as with ash, our native Laraceae, the sassafras, red bay, what have you, they had never been exposed to the laurel wilt pathogen. And so in China, in Asia, where this beetle is native, they had co-evolved with the laurel wilt pathogen for many, many, many years, perhaps thousands of years. So over that time period, the susceptible Laraceae would have died, and eventually there would have been species of laurel trees that were more tolerant or resistant to red bay ambrosia beetle. And that, therefore, limited red bay ambrosia beetle the life history to attacking and colonizing very stressed, weakened hosts. Whereas here, because the sassafras and red bay have never been exposed to that pathogen, red bay ambrosia beetle can tunnel into a healthy tree. That tree doesn't even know what this is. It may think it's a mechanical wound. And then as that disease gets started, or the pathogen spreads, the tree doesn't have the the chemistry to prevent that infection.
So similar to, I guess, a human body that creates antibodies for certain diseases that we encounter. It may take a while, but we will build them and we'll get through a cold or whatever it is. And they have no system to protect themselves.
Correct. Similar to flu, the feared new strains of flu, the Laurel wilt disease it's an exaggerated immune system, isn't it? Or an immune response, rather.
Yes, it's not actually fungus is blocking the water transporting system. It's like I would say, non-appropriate defense response from the tree is actually killing itself.
So the non-response to that is what's killing the tree?
Yeah, it's like malfunction in their immune system.
Okay.
That's what kills the tree. It's not like fungal infection like wood decay fungi.
Mm-hmm.
It's disintegrating the wood structure and everything. Yeah. But this one it doesn't. This one just leaves off of a sapwood tissue. But tree thought, oops, we need to do something. But actually that something kills the tree.
What else are y'all watching for? What's Louisiana specific that folks need to know about?
So, in regards to plant diseases, tree diseases, there are some endemic problems we have to deal with, like Fusarium pitch cankle on pines and Fujiform rust on pines and root rot on hardwoods, but they are not invasives. Mm-hmm. So I would say the laurel wilt is the only true invasive plant disease, tree disease that we are dealing with right now.
Okay.
And you always need to keep an eye on the southern oak death because it's federally regulated pathogen and has really wide host range. It can attack 150 plus different plant species. And it can also harm the nursery industry because it's federally regulated. And once they found infected plants inside their nursery, they will just march in and destroy the plants and nearby plants and put you on several years of quarantine protocol.
Is there anything nurseries can do to be on the lookout for this or to be aware of that?
So since this is federally regulated, they should have the protocol when they receive the shipments especially from the West.
Okay.
And even the West the suppliers in the West, they should follow the protocol. They have to sample those shipments, and they need to make sure it's not contaminated with the pathogen. Mm-hmm. So they can follow that APHIS, that's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, another USDA agency. They should follow USDA APHIS protocol. And once they found it, they have to report immediately either to APHIS or a state plant regulatory official.
Now, is that tested before a shipment is made or when it was received or both? Or
the test has to be made before the shipment from the West, like from California, Oregon, Washington side. Mm-hmm. And once the shipment has arrived, the nurseryman was told to separate those new shipments, and just in case there's any kind of symptom development. Okay. But they are not allowed to treat those with chemicals because they can mask the symptoms.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even if nurseries receive something from out west and it's been tested, there is a quarantine period when they receive it?
It's not mandatory. It's recommended.
Recommended.
Yeah, okay. They should have a specific area for keep those new shipments from the West for a couple of weeks, several weeks, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So hopefully nurses are following that if they're ordering from things out west. What about on the insect side there?
I believe the most feared is the introduction of the gypsy moth, which is recently been renamed to the spongy moth, non-native again, an invasive species that is a real problem up in the Northeast. Annually defoliates thousands of acres of hardwoods. Interestingly, it was intentionally introduced back in, I believe, the early 1900s. Don't quote me on that, but because they hoped it would be a producer of silk for a silk industry. And soon it escaped and became a real problem. Now the Forest Service and other agencies spend millions of dollars each year on a spray program attempting to limit its distribution. And that program is called Slow the Spread. And as you can figure out from the title, it doesn't mean they stop the spread. Spongy moths are really strong flyers, and in addition to that, they oviposit, lay their eggs in these hairy masses on just about anything. They've been found on RVs, under utility trailers, just about anything, unfortunately, that may travel long distances. Therefore, it's a real concern that they will eventually become problematic in the West. Now, when that occurs is anyone's guess, but the state, Louisiana Department of Ag and Forestry, annually conducts spongy moth surveys. Traps are put out. You may have seen these little triangular or prism-shaped paper traps hanging in different host trees, hardwoods. Gypsy moths, as opposed to the emerald ash borer, have a long-range sex pheromone, and so that makes detection of these moths much better. So folks are watching for it. It's worth reading more about it, learning about it, and keeping an eye on your hardwoods.
For anyone out there, be they a owner of a forest or even folks have trees and that they enjoy in the environment of their own homes, if they suspect something, what would they do? What should they do? Should they contact you? Should they contact the Forest Service? Should they contact an arborist? Or what might you suggest?
They may contact us, and they may contact them and send some samples to a LSU plant disease clinic, and they may call parish agents. And what other options do they have, Wood?
I think you covered it. Typically, the first line of defense, I mean, we all work together, but if they were to reach out to their extension agent within the Ag Center, if they reach out to their Louisiana Department of Ag and Forestry district foresters, they're very educated in these pests.
They don't have to assume that's an invasive species, but it is worth reaching out, especially to the Extension Service, since they cover varied things, plants, insects, trees, things of that nature. So I think that would be good. And there is LSU Ag Center in most areas of the state that they can contact. They can check it out online and look for the facility closest to them. Jaesoon Hwang, plant pathologist with the U.S. Forest Service, Forest Health Protection, and Wood Johnson, entomologist with the U.S. Forest Service, Forest Health Protection. It's a big mouthful to say. Thank you guys for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Mind of the Forest, a podcast of the Louisiana Forestry Association. This episode of Mind of the Forest was sponsored by First South Farm Credit. First South is your premier rural lender. With over 100 years financing timber and agriculture, they have the expertise you're looking for when financing rural property. If you're looking to purchase or refinance land, call your local First South Farm Credit Office, or you can find them online at firstsouthland.com. If you'd like to learn more about sustainable forestry and the LFA and its programs, and how you can be part of an organization that supports landowners, loggers, and wood manufacturers in the state, go to laforestry.com. You can send comments or suggestions to me by email at jzeringue@laforestry.com. That's jzeringue at laforestry.com, or check out the show notes for our contact information. You also can subscribe to Mind of the Forest on your favorite podcast app, and be sure to tap the notifications button. That way you'll know when the next podcast drops each month. And we thank you for doing that. Remember, at the Louisiana Forestry Association, we're minding the forest for you.